It's 9 o'clock. This is the regular meeting of Mills County Commissioners Court, Monday, July 12th. Present in the courtroom, besides myself as county judge, we have Commissioner Guerin and Commissioner Williams. 3 constitutes a physical quorum. We have present via Zoom Commissioner Wright and Commissioner Don. Dale Parton, I'm sorry. So that constitutes 100% of the court being legally present. And so the court is duly convened. We also have present in the courtroom that I can see anyway, our Secretary Summer Campbell, our Treasurer Summer Campbell, the County Clerk Sonia Scott, Sheriff Quinn Hammond, and County Attorney Gerald Hayek. And an audience present also that's off camera. So with that, let us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commissioner Williams, could you lead us in prayer?
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day that you have granted us. Thank you for us living in this great county of Mills County. Thank you for the rain you have bestowed upon our land. Father, be with us here today as we do the business of Mills County. Direct us to support them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. The first item on the agenda is review of the minutes of June 25th and June 28th that were in your packages. I've reviewed them. Commissioners, are there any comments or corrections?
Nobody has any. I make a motion that we approve it.
I'll second it.
We have a motion from Commissioner Williams, a second from Commissioner Guerin. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Wright, I didn't hear you. If you would either be closer to your speaker, raise your hand.
Aye.
Got it. Okay, that's unanimous approval of the minutes. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Number 3, audience with individuals. We have Jamie Simmons signed up to speak about subdivision. Mr. Simmons, would you like to speak now or later?
I'll speak later.
Okay. Just to help me call on you at the right time, we have a lot of subdivision stuff on the agenda. We have 2 specific subdivisions, a bond, and then an item on the general discussion of the new ordinance. Can you tell me which one you would like to speak before?
I would say, that I would like to speak before the general discussion. There's a few specific items we have.
Okay.
Issues with, but
So the ordinance.
mostly it's on the general document. So.
Well, okay. Thank you very much. That's helpful. Okay, this being the first meeting of July, we have a list of monthly departmental reports and under the category of consent agenda, which we will just, we can go through, ask questions, but then approve with a single motion. If any of the items need a more detailed discussion or a separate action, we can pull it out of the consent agenda and address it separately. With that being said, the first item is the, well, actually there's 3. There's a monthly and quarterly treasurer's reports and the quarterly investment report. Would just like to point out that the report that's entitled Mills County Funds Report, to remember these are funds. These are not necessarily each individual checking accounts. These are the way governments keep track of the money. Some of them are general and other funds are dedicated or special purpose. We'll go through these in order. Are there any questions with regard regard to the quarterly, no, the monthly treasurer's report. That's the one that says for June 2021. Okay, then we have the quarterly treasurer's report for the quarter that ended June 30, 2021. And the quarterly investment report for the period ended June 30, showing investment balances, get a magnifier, of $3,158,000 rounded at the end of the quarter. See, primarily in CDs, earning rates that require a lot of decimal points. Looks like most of them are about a 1% or less. Any questions on the investment report?
I have no.
Okay. Then we have the quarterly, not quarterly, the accounts payable report for the period that since our last meeting. So everybody had a chance to review that report. It was distributed electronically Friday.
I move we approve the accounts payable and payroll.
Okay, well, let us, unless there's any questions on it, let us hold that motion and we'll just deal with it at the end of the consent agenda. We have the monthly Mills Central Appraisal District collection report. You can see that the current year taxes, everything is collected except $39,249, and that's 98.8% collections through June. You also see, if you look at the 2019 taxes, there remains $311,000 of that uncollected, which is primarily the ongoing appeal of the Encore taxes for back in 2019.
And supposedly, the last appraisal meeting, hopefully knows something in August. So,
good.
I mean, not an answer, but maybe a date when we're going to go to that court hearing.
Yeah, I think best guess this is going to be in our next budget year.
Yeah.
Okay, we have reports from the county clerk and the district clerk. This is fees and fines received. You can see on the county clerk side, $7,100. Nope, that's not right. Total, including credit cards, e-filing, and everything else. Yeah, looks like it's $7,900. The majority of it is recording fees. Then there's the district clerk side of it, which is another $6,789. The largest, that's spread out over a number of categories, but the largest of which are fines. We have the extension office report. Mileage traveled of the month of 610 miles, primarily it's like events in College Station and San Angelo, and current month plans on the second page. I skipped the tax assessor collector report for June. That did not come in time for the agenda. I think that we may have to double up next month on that one. The sheriff's report, this is for the month of June, calls for service 331, with 202 of those for the Sheriff's Department, 58 for EMS, and 27 for fire. and the rest were various other things. Shows the new jail bookings of 24, out of county prisoner housing billed 14,850, with San Saba and Coryell counties being the primary components of that. The monthly JP's report is in there. It's the usual 4-page report. If you sift through it on the first page, you'll see total new cases filed of about, just reading down the first column, 67 non-parking and 12 other, and then dispositions down at line 16, 53 dispositions, and then a total for the end of the month. See the civil cases on the next page, the juvenile, and we are missing, there's usually a 4th page that shows fines and fees collected. Let's see if I can find it. It may just be not in my, do you have it?
No, let me see.
Okay, well, it would reflect the fees collected. I'll mention those next meeting, as well as the number of cases magistrated and number of inquests ordered.
Yeah, so here it is online.
You found it?
Yeah, kept by the county was $12,282.48. Remitted to the state was $5,416, and brings a total of $17,698.
Okay,
But county getting $12,000.
thank you. Next one is the receipts from the judge's office. You can see we rented the senior center 3 times during the month, all the community organizations and no charge, and then 2 septic permits were sold. There's a monthly EMS report showing calls and response times in the city of Gulfway and in the Mills County outside of the city of Gulfway, with average response times in Gulfway to 5 minutes and 25 seconds, and roll calls 19 minutes and 5 seconds. I see Mr. Alexander, our regional chief, is in the audience if there are any questions on the EMS report. Okay.
Back to the judge's receipts.
Yeah.
On the septic permits, how many did y'all plan for this year? Since we're halfway through the year.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I do know on the revenue side, we're already in half a year past on the revenue side where we are for the full year. So it's running well ahead. We saw a big pickup in that coming out of COVID. Veterans service report, see 22 veterans helped individually, brief summaries of what was done, 40 hours of work. Any questions on the consent agenda that we didn't hit as we flipped through it? Now, Commissioner Guerin, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move we approve the consent agenda.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry, Commissioner Wright, did you have a question?
No, I just second the motion.
I'm sorry.
Approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. So we have a motion from Commissioner Guerin, a second from Commissioner Wright. Any other discussion?
Can I add to that, with the exception of H, we did not have the tax collector's report.
You are correct. Commissioner Guerin, would you be open to we modify your motion to approve the consent agenda except for item H?
Yes, sir, that'd be fine.
And Commissioner Wright, would your second still be good for that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we have a modified motion. We have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, moving on to our action agenda. Number 4, consider an act on a preliminary plat of Rolling Oaks subdivision. This, as y'all will recall, we had this presented to us maybe a month ago. There were a number of items on the checklist that were missing. It went back for more work, and now it is back before us. In your package, you have the commitments for the utilities and the water, and a brief engineering report that talks about floodplain and sewage suitability. There's also the checklist from our existing subdivision ordinance that I've gone through and checked off that it's substantially all here. It's been over with Don King. He feels it's, to speak for him, I don't see him on the line, that it's appropriate for the court to consider. And let's get a microphone. I'm sorry.
Judge, Commissioner, thank you. We did add some lots to what you had seen prior. Court came up and said they could add some services in there. So we increased the group of tracks from what we originally presented.
Your name, Corey.
I'm sorry, I'm Mike Freeman. That's one of the associates.
And that's reflected in the plat that's been filed, that's there on the table. And it went from 140, I think, to what?
165.
Okay. And as I recall, it's 160 taps in from Corex and 5 wells.
That's correct.
Anything else you'd like to say about it?
I want to speak something by you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I looked at the plat and I looked at the checklist and I didn't check that. And the county attorney have any comments?
I guess the only, we kind of hit this in midstream. County designated representative will review survey that's prior to submission to the court. I think we got pretty involved. It would be my opinion, future matters that we follow that procedure and we don't deal with the preliminary plan. That goes designated survey. The court only has to look at the final plan. That doesn't have anything to do with this.
That would take a lot of work out of the courthouse. Unfortunately, it will also take us modifying our existing ordinance, which requires it to be done this way. But Don King has received this electronically and has weighed in on it. So his recommendation as a preliminary plat was that we accepted as a preliminary plat.
I make a motion that we approve the preliminary plat of Rolling Oaks subdivision.
I'll second that. So we have a motion and a second to approve the preliminary plat on Rolling Oaks subdivision. This basically gives the developer the go-ahead to develop the material for a final plat, which will then come back to the court and to our designated surveyor. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Yes, I could not hear what Mr. Hale was saying.
Okay. Commissioner Parkman, what the county attorney's recommendation was that going forward, we have the preliminary plats dealt with by our designated surveyor and not going through court for approval.
Okay.
And that, I think we might all be in agreement on that, but it's one of these things that's written into the ordinance, so we have to, until we modify it, step through the steps as required.
Yes.
Any other questions, Mr. Parkin?
I guess the only thing I have still the same as last time. They do have a water line, but other than their pond down there at Lomita, I don't think there's really a backup water system.
Commissioner Wright, this is in your backyard. Do you have any comments?
What he's asking, the backup water system is the Colorado River. You know, they have a holding area that they pump water to, but they have plenty of water, as far as I know.
Okay, we
That's all I
have
have.
a motion and a second. Let me call for a vote. All in favor of, what are we doing? Approving the preliminary plat on Rolling Oats, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Okay, Commissioner Parton is opposed. Commissioner Wright, I couldn't tell where your wave, which, are you for or against?
I approve it. I'm for it.
Okay, thank you. So a vote of,
You're welcome.
we have approved that. Oh, number 6, no, number 5, consider an act on the construction bond amount for Indian Springs. Let me give a little bit of background on where this is coming from. We're not approving the bond itself. If you look at page 9 of our existing ordinance, item 3, it says it requires a construction bond, but it says the construction bond shall be in such an amount as may be determined by Commissioner's Court, not to exceed the estimated cost of construction of roads and streets. So that's the ordinance and the language we are operating under. So we're not approving the language of the bond, we're approving the amount. And its amount as may be determined by the court not to exceed the estimated cost. And then in your package, we have the estimated cost with quantities and prices totaling $393,570. Before we get deeper in this discussion, let me ask, are there people representing Indian Springs present in the audience?
Yes.
Is there, anything you would like to say on this?
State your name.
Marcus Warner with Blue Engineering. Marcus. We prepared the one zone based on fixed site. Unit quantities were averaged for the last 3 months. In reality, it should be a lot less expensive. But since I have to put my name on it, we use a higher amount. So it may seem a little bit inflated, but I have to make sure it can be built. That's the explanation.
Questions from the court? Commissioner Parkin, did you have any questions you'd like to address?
I couldn't hear what he was saying.
Did he receive this estimate? Dale, did you receive this estimate?
Yes, I
Yeah,
know
we looked at it the other day. I do
And
not.
our discussion of it was we couldn't speak to the the quantities, but the pricing looked high compared to what we're seeing in the county,
Yes, yes.
which in this case is in the county's favor.
Again, he said he's putting his name on it, so. So we can't go any higher than this. We couldn't round this to 400, is what you're saying.
Well,
That was what the,
I'm just reading from this. It says not to exceed the estimated cost of construction. And this, almost in its title, it's the preliminary estimated cost of construction.
I make a motion that we approve, the construction bond amount of $393,570.84 for Indian Springs Section 3.
I'll second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Williams, a second from Commissioner Guerin. Any further discussion? Anything that our county attorney would like to add?
Oh, Your Honor.
Okay, the answer to that, Commissioner Parkin, is no. Commissioner Parkin, Wright, anything you would like to ask or add?
No, what we looked at the other day, their prices on their stuff were considerably above what probably the cost would be.
Okay, well, let me call for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Raise your
Aye.
hand. That's unanimous. Okay. Mr. Horner, you might stick around. Let's see. No. Yeah, consider act on the final plat of Indian Springs subdivision. I've been over this by phone with our designated engineer. He's been back and forth with Mr. Lerner, I believe. There have been a few changes on the technical part of the plat. It now meets Mr. King's specifications. There's a checklist and everything that's applicable I have found. There is some things to point out to the court. There's a engineering report in here that speaks to the septic situation. And our ordinance requires on the subdivisions of this size that 10% of the lots be perk tested. And this report indicates that it was done. We have maps as to where it was done. And the point I'd like to point out to the court was that the conclusion is that it's likely that the lots will require a specialized septic system, not your standard drain field. And then it goes on to list about 6 types of septic systems that might be appropriate. This meets the requirements of our ordinance. It's not surprising based on the terrain, but it's an indication of what we'll be looking for in other subdivisions. And it's good work. Thank you. Anyway, that's all I have to put before the court. Mr. Warner, is there anything you would like to add?
This one, so we went through the checklist earlier.
Now, I'd like to clarify something for the court and the applicant. What we're doing here, gentlemen, is not necessarily approving the final plat. Let me read this to you. After examining the final plat, the court shall notify the developer in writing of its intent to approve or disapprove. It shall be clearly understood, however, that no plat will be finally approved for recording until such time as all streets, culverts, and other drainage facilities, utilities, etc., have been installed and inspected within the subdivision. It is the responsibility of the precinct commissioner and a registered professional engineer appointed by Commissioners Court to make the inspection of streets, culverts, and drainage facilities, utilities, and he shall report his findings to Commissioners Court. The cost of such inspection shall be charged to developer and paid prior to final approval of the plat. Then it goes on, if the construction is satisfactory to the Commissioners Court, the developer shall be notified that the plat is ready to be filed for record, and the county judge acting on behalf of the court shall sign the plat indicating their approval. And then it goes on filing fees and stuff. The package that was presented to the court includes all the other required document. There's actually the homeowner's dedication. There's the dedication of the easements. All of this is in form and substance ready to be filed. So what we are doing is, let's see, make sure I say this right. Let's assume we're moving toward approval. That we would indicate our intent to approve, which means that if everything is done as laid out and then confirmed on the ground, then it will be approved. So if we're going for approval, we're not approving the final plat. That's what this is what we're doing. We're expressing our intent to approve when it's complete. I just wanted to clarify that before anybody made a motion. Mr. Warner, is there anything you'd like to add?
We kind of noticed that wording in most jurisdictions, the reason for the bond. We actually get this construction bond dedicated to the county in the event that the developer didn't complete the infrastructure. And having that bond, they would play with themselves. So the whole intent of the bond is that you can file on the plat prior to construction improvements. That's the goal of the jurisdiction.
I too have seen that in other jurisdictions, but I feel constrained about what my distant predecessors did here in 1985. That's what our rules say. I would invite our county attorney if he has an opinion he'd like to offer. Okay. Any further discussion?
I make a motion to approve the final plat of Indian Street subdivision. As mentioned,
So
through the guidelines of 1985 subdivision.
So that would, let me try and restate that, if you don't mind. Okay, I will.
It has to be the court's
I
intention
move
to
that the
approve the
court
problem.
register its intent to approve the final plat and documents as submitted today, following their completion pursuant to Section E of the Mills County subdivision ordinance.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, let's call for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
One opposed, Commissioner Parkman. So 4-1. Thank you, Mr. Warner. Okay, number 7, consider an act on Clark roofing proposal for the courthouse and 1888 jail. We put this agenda together a week ago to get it in the Eagle and anticipated following the joint inspection by Clark and the engineer for TAC that we would have an approval and a recommendation. And at this point, that has not been forthcoming. The problem was that the preliminary finding from the engineer for TAC was that the roof did not need to be replaced. After the on-site inspection, the manufacturer's specifications for the roof indicate that the impact damage would have caused the adhesive that affixes the flat roof to the roof deck to fail, potentially catastrophically and go off. And then TAC and its engineer were going to take that into consideration.
Yeah, as of this morning, Guy said that his deal has not.
Yeah, so we listed it for approval so we could act on it. We don't have, in my view, anything to act on. We do expect something in writing. They've given us the go ahead and coverage to replace the broken glass. That was done in the courthouse and has yet to be done in the old jail. They are verbally said that they'll replace the leaking sills around the wooden windows in the courthouse. I'm waiting for that in writing. But I'd say there's no action to be taken there.
I make a motion that we table agenda item number 7.
I'll second
We have a motion from Commissioner Williams, second from Commissioner Guerin to table action on number 7, the park roofing proposal. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so it's 5-0. Consider an act on approval of bond for deputies Sandlin and Gumboldt. We have these, I believe, are the 2 deputies that have recently completed school and been licensed. There are bonds that are required. There's bonds that are presented to the court in the amount of $25,000 each. I think I'm reading that right. No, $5,000 each to be accepted by the court. The Sheriff, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, you are, they're, silent, sworn, and painters about that this morning.
I
Okay,
make a motion that we approve the bonds set for the 2 deputies, Sandlin and Gumboldt.
Give a lot.
Give a lot. There, let's should say it.
my apologies. Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Williams. I'll second it. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. That's unanimous. Consider an act on special budget amendments. Okay. This is a list from our treasurer. What we've got is we have received insurance proceeds from hail damage. I believe it was all, maybe it was hail and other accident damage, but it all involves the sheriff's vehicles. So we have, at one side, we have insurance claims coming in, payments coming in, and then we have repair expense on the other side. Obviously, neither of which were budgeted. So this is a special budget amendment. It's unforeseen insurance claims proceeds and to create the income item for the, let's see if I'm reading this right, for the insurance proceeds. There's one other item listed, and that's a grant line item in the amount of $473,263. That's the first 50% installment of the American Rescue Association Act that ultimately Mills County will receive a little over $900,000. Has to be spent on designated list of projects, which is still in flux. but the money is in our bank account. It was, of course, unbudgeted. It's a grant money. And we just acknowledge, the amendment is the acknowledged receipt of that. So we have two things, receipt of the American Rescue Money grant being added to the budget, and the law enforcement side insurance proceeds and vehicle repair. Ms. Campbell, is there anything you'd like to add to that? Well, I move approval of the special budget amendments. Who seconded?
I'll say it.
Okay. Commissioner Williams seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. That's unanimous. Okay, number 10, consider an act on the designation of basement office space in the courthouse as an elections office. This is space previously occupied by the vehicle registration. They moved to the third floor a number of years ago. For a while, it's been storage. We now have need for space for our election equipment and training. And at the same time, it has to be designated as a specific area and secure. Ms. Scott, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, we have this out of room. The elections office is downstairs in the clerk's office, and it's just stacked on top of each other, and it makes it very difficult to be organized. So we're looking to move into a bigger space that we can be organized.
Yes, as court will recall, we bought a lot of new expensive voting machines with a grant last year, and these require training and testing for each use, and they need to be handled a little more carefully.
Is that going to be enough room for you?
Yes.
Also, at the same time, I guess we mentioned, Guy is also running out of room in his office. And he's gonna bring it to the court too, to maybe look at getting some more room or something. So we may have another agenda item coming to us real soon. So-
Yes, yeah, I'm aware of that. I just wanted to go down and look at it myself before we brought in a recommendation.
Well, it's not on the agenda today, so.
It
I make
is.
a motion that we approve the designation of the basement office space as election office.
I'll say it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let's move a little bit out of order and take up the proposed subdivision. It's just discussion. It's item 12. We have Mr. Simmons signed up to speak on that. Mr. Simmons, you would come up and use the microphone.
I'm James Simmons, precinct 1. I had a little small ranch out on 315, and after reading the subdivision rules, the proposed draft that was written on June 3rd, 2021, I'm not sure if it's updated. That's just the copy that I was able to obtain and read. I have some general concerns about the document overall. And overall, I feel that the document that was written is vague. It does not say whether it will apply just to those who wish to subdivide, or if it applies to all landowners in Mills County. And if it does apply to all landowners in Mills County, it brings up some questions because, as I said, in my opinion, the document itself is very vague. If land is subdivided into individual plots, for instance, it brings up a lot of tax issues for those who own land. Are those individual plots going to be taxed in the future separately from the overall land? Will all landowners eventually have to slice off 10 acres and put gates on each one as the rules are stated in the document? It just seems to me that it's vague. It does not spell out the rules and who, and well, I should say what those rules are going to apply to. Is it going to apply to the big ranch who's closing down, the guy's got thousands of acres, hundreds of acres, and he subdivides out so that people can develop on it? Or is it going to apply to the small rancher who's out here trying to eat a living, you know, as a ranch? And, you know, 17 acres of land, you're not going to run a large operation. But if run smartly, you can make a living on it. And it just seems to me that these rules are written to drive us out. The tax exemption rules that they're looking at that has been proposed to be adopted seems to be written to, I don't want to say punish, but that's what it feels like, the small landowner who is trying to make a living. Yeah, and we are an agricultural based community. There's not an industry here, except for Schuster's down there in the middle of town, that you can say it's manufacturing industry in Mills County that I know of. There's no factories, there's no 3M plant. That's in Brownwood, you know. So I understand the need to update the rules, to revise the existing rules. But generally speaking, on the document overall, I would like to see personally some clarifying statements added to that document to make sure that the existing landowners and those who might want to leave the big city and come out into the country and try their hand at agriculture are not going to be punished in the future. Again, that's a terrible word to use, but I can't think of another one. By tax rules and things of that nature. And specifically, there are two items in there. One is the ag exemption rule that I just touched on. The other is the firearms discharge. A little background, I was 20 years in the military. I retired as Sergeant First Class in 2016. I've done ranges my entire career. And I'm not talking about small ones, I'm talking about rockets. I've fired javelins, I've fired walls, dragons, and I understand the need for public safety. 10 acres of land, I promise you, is big enough to fire a rifle on if the proper safety measures are in place. Now, if you want to have somebody come out and inspect the land and make sure that there's a nice size berm out there where you're not attacking somebody else's property, then I can understand, you know, adding that into it. But for those of us who get around weapons their entire lives and who know what they're doing, with proper safety measures in place, I don't think that discharging a firearm on 10 acres of land is going to be that big of a detriment. But as I said, with the proper safety precautions in place. So that's pretty much where I stand at the moment, as far as the general document and those two specific. Thank you.
Thank you. This item's on here for discussion with no specific action. Just to let the court know that after, I guess, the work session and to add clarity that it only applied to new platted subdivisions, there is a revised ordinance or revised draft out on the county website, and I think it's got a date on it in
I'm looking at it right now, Judge. It says
it's the 30th of June. Okay. Now, that being said, as I mentioned at the last commissioner's court meeting, I had to put this aside, and there's no action proposed and none being taken. We canceled the public hearing, ran that ad in the paper, I think, a week ago, because of the pressure of both the two existing subdivisions and the hard-coded budget deadlines that we have to meet. So I can just continue to say that, you know, we're all receiving input, that we take it under consideration. We'll try and make notes and remember it. And then after we get the budget done and the tax rate done, it's going to be on into probably September. And then we come back and we start looking at the subdivision ordinance. In the meantime, I'm told by Mr. King that we're not completely naked, that the 1985 ordinance, in his view, is fairly robust. I mean, it's out of date, and there's things that can be addressed, and you heard some of it today on the bond in lieu of construction work, but that we rely on the existing ordinance, which it would have to do anyway, until we can get to the new ordinance, and we shouldn't try and jam the new ordinance just because we have two subdivisions that wouldn't fit under it anyway. So that's all I had to say on item 12. And Mr. Simmons, I appreciate your comments, and you're welcome to stop by at any time.
We'd be glad to visit with you anytime. Anything.
On the budget, there's a package. We just walk through a summary for the benefit of the audience and the people that maybe remotely. Just an overview of our budget environment compared to last year is that the activity levels are returning to normal in the county post-COVID. The tax roll, and I want to emphasize that it's the estimated preliminary tax rolls are basically flat for Mills County. Actually what happens to get to that net flat roll, the industrial roll is down and the non-industrial real estate roll is up, and the net's about flat. Industrial doesn't mean the factories and smokestacks. It's primarily what's called business personal property, which in this county, the big numbers are transmission lines, wind farms, substations, that type of stuff. And then a lot of projects last year in the county were put on hold for COVID. Speaking of COVID, the local cases have tailed off over the last month. There have only been 2 reported. The vaccination level for the county is about 35% of our eligible population. That's through Friday. A similar number for the state of Texas would be 50%. There's a risk of new variants, but that risk is going to be largely confined to the unvaccinated population. There's COVID grant money and government emergency orders have given the county the ability to perform many functions remotely, and both court, district court, county court, and commissioners court have the ability and have been functioning via Zoom when necessary. It goes without saying that the population and the court is quite tired of COVID, and the state also, and they have curtailed their reporting of it. So our tax base actually increased on the preliminaries of $4 million. There was $4.7 million reported of new construction in the county. On the wind farm side, the values of the existing wind farms dropped via depreciation by 39 million from 265 million last year. But they still generate just over 725,000 of county taxes this year. That's an estimate based on the tax rate assumption, but that's about 16.5% of our revenue. So although they're down, that 16.5% is a substantial contribution. Other wild cards, and Commissioner Williams mentioned it earlier, is the encore appeal of the 2019 taxes. That's in total about $350,000. That was a 2019 issue. It's of no effect in 2020 or 2021, but whenever that appeal is resolved, if it's favorable, we'll bring that extra money to the county. That will likely be resolved in the fiscal year 2021, 2022, but at present, it's not in the budget. in calendar year 2022, we'll start seeing the first of pilot payments from the Pretty Wind project. That project's under construction. Those payments in that year would be a little over $750,000. That's next fiscal year. That's not this one. So part of the issue in our budgeting is getting from here to there. There's another project we gave abatement to through a pilot program, but that's looking a little less likely, so I'm not talking about the numbers. The budget goals we set at the beginning of the process was to maintain a no new taxes tax rate. That's the old lingo will be called the effective tax rate. If we can go lower, we should. We can go into that. Also think we're working toward a balanced budget, at least on operational expenses, although we may need to tap our reserves for capital investments. It's a mistake to spend non-recurring income or capital reserves for operating expenses. That's a formula for disaster. Budget goals including improving our core county services, restoring the community organizations to their pre-COVID level. That was the amounts we had budgeted to them back in 2019. We asked everybody to take a cut for their non-emergency services related organizations in 2020, and they did, and I'd like to be able to give that back. We plan to use that American Rescue Act money of $942,000. We're still waiting on the rules, but the tentative plan, my tentative plan remains a new EMS station, which would also be available for storing pandemic supplies and performing pandemic operations, including inoculations and supply dispersal. And those are key concepts of fitting within the grant money. We have land behind the Sheriff's Department, behind the Law Enforcement Center that is suitable. And the ambulance existing station no longer accommodates the size ambulances they use, plus there are other physical problems with it. So we're waiting for the final grant rules to be drafted, but that remains a tentative plan, open to obviously discussion and consideration. The county would then sell the existing ambulance barn. The way that was structured when the transaction was done with Hamilton Healthcare is the county gets 50% of the proceeds. So whatever that old filling station's worth, half of it would come back into the general fund. Also, in the budget, I plan to continue to chip away at the unfunded pension liability for the Mills County employees. We did that a little bit last year, and that's something we need to keep doing every year, or it's someday it'll blow up and bite us. What the budget?
I think that has already done the accounts.
It absolutely is. We're lucky we're small enough, and I think we can get ahead of it. But, it's interesting. One stipulation that's been clear on some of these government grants, they're aware of things like that too, and you are absolutely prohibited from using these grant monies to fix unfunded pension liabilities. What the budget doesn't do, this doesn't include any renovation for the courthouse or old jail. It doesn't add any new county positions. It doesn't increase employee benefits, and it doesn't incur any additional debt. Now, behind that, with all that verbiage, all I've done is try to estimate the revenue lines. You can see my best number on taxes is rounded 4.4 million. In current year budget, 4.4 million. Well, some of that you're losing due to rounding. There's that extra $4 million of property is about an extra $30,000 of taxes. So the top line tax revenue is pretty close to flat. County's got other revenue sources, and they're substantial. The preliminary budget number there is $1.3 million. That compares to $1,160,000, $1,170,000 in the current year. Biggest thing going on here is the post-COVID recovery, things getting back to normal. These numbers include things like fines and fees, court activity, permits, prisoner boarding, city of Gold Plate reimbursement, precinct money, road and bridge money coming in from vehicle license plates, just all the nickels and dimes that really slowed down during COVID. So now some amount of our budget has to go and where it goes, and that's the interest and sinking fund at the moment. We have to put that aside to pay the bonds. That's $483,650. That leaves the county to operate on $5,257,000. If you compare that to the current year, $5,046,000, round numbers, that's $200,000 more money than last year. Okay, now this next part's not anything except really the roll up of what everybody turned in. And I just want to make a point. You can see I tried to lump it because honestly, this is like 43 pages of printout. But just to get to a discussion point, it's what's turned in is 5.5 million of expenses, up from 4.8 million in the current year. So that's, you can see the increase, and it's lumped. There's courthouse departments. That's everything here in the courthouse. There's law enforcement, there's jail, there's the court system. This is prosecutors and district court. There's EMS and the volunteer fire departments. There's precincts and road and bridge all lumped together. And then there's subtotal, and then subtotal is 4.7 million versus 4.2 million the prior year. So about a $500,000 requested increase if everybody just got what they asked for. Then you've got what's called non-departmental. This includes the MCAD budget, the EMS contract, insurance, audit, those type of things. So if you just take all this together, it spends, the request spend 276,000 more than we think we're going to make. And this is ignoring grants, ignoring the big grants. There's some minor grants that are in here that are generally recurring that are included. And versus current year, it looks like we may actually have a surplus of 164,000. Now, the way surpluses work, that will just end up in the fund balance and ultimately in our investments. And also, just because it's here doesn't mean it's going to be here at the end of the year. So that's where we are going into the budget process. My job from here is the county judge has to prepare a preliminary budget. This is statute, and file it with the county clerk. And the schedule is we can't have a hearing on it or act on it or anything until the 15th of the month following when it's filed. So if I do this, and this is why it's important, by the end of July, we can start having hearings and discussions and vote. We can discuss this to death, right, but we can't do anything until mid-August if we do it by July. If I miss that by 2 days and go into August, we can't deal with this till September. So there's a lot of pressure to get something filed. So that's where we are on the.
Is there any way that we can get a copy of what budget already then, I mean, what everybody can do to look at that, if we wanted to go through the hard numbers. Are you gonna try to do that, or?
Well, I'm gonna do it and come up with a recommendation, but everything in government, in my view, is open. And if you would like those 40 some odd pages, somewhere I can print them off for you or send them to you electronically.
I mean, that email's fine with me, you don't.
Yeah.
It's a tree that do that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no secrets in it. I'm just trying to, I'm gonna have to file a preliminary budget and you see. Now, what we've tried to do in meeting with the departments is go through and understand what's behind the numbers. Because looking at numbers just says, okay, this number is this. It doesn't say this is 2 squad cars or 1 maintainer or that type of information. But the next step then is going to be elected officials' salaries. And that process is everybody needs to get a letter saying what their salary is or is proposed. There's a time period in the statute to give you some of this, to object, to file a grievance. Then there's a process that you go through that. And then again, there has to be a publication in the newspaper of increases, of officials receiving increases. And then there's a public hearing, and then it's got to be included in the vote. So again, there's clocks running. What we've gone 2 years of budgets where I have not proposed any increases for elected officials. This year, and the first page, what I just handed you, shows the salaries as best we can determine from nearby counties, including some that aren't our size. Lampasas and Brown County are there just for a point of reference, but I'd tell you that others, McCulloch, Coleman, Comanche, Hamilton, San Saba, they're all bigger than us, I believe, in population, but they're more comparable to us in our terms of operations. So what I'm going to propose what I'm going to notify the elected officials of is, except for our 3 most highly compensated officials, propose small raises. And first of all, everybody will continue to receive, everybody, including the county where I'm planning to budget, the longevity pay. There's other pay that people get for different things. There's state supplements, there's certificate pay, and law enforcement. Excuse me. And so anyway, I'm going to provide notification letters today that other than the 3 most highly compensated officials, gives everybody a raise of approximately $1,000. I mean, some are slightly more, some are slightly less, but that's the, let's see if I even have it exact. No, the main thing there is to get it moving. Now, what I'm going to propose is not going to tie back to, for instance, what you asked for on the printout, Commissioner Williams, because one employee, one elected official turned in a number that my salary should be X, and that's rolled up in the numbers I read to you. That's not going to be what I'm going to notify people of in their salary. We're going to, and somebody else turned in, I want everybody to have 3%, and that's again rolled up in the gross numbers, but not in the individual compensation. And another elected official turned in, I want to make at least as much as so-and-so, and not going to do that. Now, most of one concept you'll see is a lot of these counties pay many of their officials the same. And we're not going to totally that, but we're going to be closer to that than where we are now. Subject to, of course, hearings, approvals, votes, all that stuff. But the process has to start with the notification. So that's my report on the budget process as it now stands and what's happening next. This is listed as discussion, and it sounded like a soliloquy. So, commissioners, anything you'd like to throw in?
I know you're working hard on it. We just have-
Going for the commissioner's report.
Look, I see that you want to talk, Commissioner Wright. Let me let Commissioner Guerin finish, and then we'll cue you.
Get to the mic, Ed.
Okay, we can't hear you out here.
He's having trouble hearing you. If you can get the mic real close.
I know you spent a lot of time and trouble working on this, Judson. I for one appreciate it. And I can't wait to see the final draft. Maybe we can make some changes there to save some money.
Well, my optometrist is telling me I'm working on it too much. Commissioner Wright, was that?
Yes, my comments was kind of like with Jason. I'd kind of like to see a copy of the proposed budget of the numbers.
Well, Jason, I don't
Can we
think
come
he's
back to
asking
your
for a
office?
copy of the proposed budget because I don't have it yet. He's asked for a copy of what everybody, the consolidated request. Is that what you'd like to see, Mike?
Yes,
Yes, sir. That's what it's on.
Okay, well, Summer will distribute that electronically. Commissioner Barton, anything you'd like to add? Okay, we'll take that as a no. Commissioner Williams?
No, I'm good. I'll take this and look at it.
Okay,
I'm sure I'll have some questions.
yeah, I mean, I just want to reiterate something. When I was talking about a balanced budget operationally, we have, and we had discussion of this last year, we've got $3+ million of reserves. If we want to spend that on capital improvements, the way it's going to look in a budget is, in effect, you're going to run a deficit. I mean, you're going to say, okay, we're going to spend this, and to pull down your reserves, you have to budget spending more than you make. But the key is going to be knowing that we're doing that on purpose, and knowing that we're not doing that is to fund something that's going to happen every year, because ultimately you run out of reserves and that won't work. So if we want to do it for a new jail, a piece of equipment, an ambulance station, if you get it and you're done, I think that's appropriate. To do it, say, okay, let's pull it down and add 5 new employees. And yeah, you could do that, the money's there, but in about 3 years, you're not gonna have the money left to pay. So that's the approach to the reserves. And as we've learned from the hailstorm, there are reasons to have reserves.
Do you think we ought to pull it below 3 million?
I don't, the question from Commissioner Guerin was, do I think we should pull reserves below 3 million? And at this point, I'm not prepared to answer that. I do want to work with the treasurer and figure out what our run rate is. We need to know how much we need to make payroll, pay the electric bill, all the things that have to happen each and every month. And then make sure we know how many months of coverage we have. And as I sit here today, I can't tell you that. Okay, anything else on the budget? Commissioners requesting reports. Let's start with Commissioner Wright, your precinct 1.
We cleared about a mile of right of way on County Road 429. We've been blading. We had to replace a backhoe rear tire. We replaced a maintainer tire, and we've been removing some down trees through the weather that's fallen over in our county right of way. That's all I have.
Commissioner Guerin.
We've been shredding and grading both as the weather allows. Bladder's having some trouble with our weather here lately. Slowed down their process some. I got word a while ago they had 4 1/4 inches at their laydown yard last night. So it's flooded pretty hard out there. Guys are checking roads now. I've been in Waco for a couple of days this week for the North and East Texas judges and commissioners annual convention over there. And that's all I got.
Commissioner Parker.
We've been grading when we can, still working on some washout around Pretty and doing some brush work with the shredder.
Anything on the fire meeting you'd like to mention?
Do what?
Okay, Commissioner Williams will touch on that, never mind. Commissioner Williams?
We cleared the right away, I think we finished it on 5:50. The weather kind of really messed things up on that. Trimmed some down road, trees on 5:32, also weather related. Been hauling some material to the county barn that will allow us to. Visited with some representatives of the Ebony community. They're wanting to work on some few things of trying to keep that community center going. And one of the options, discussions was the election. And so they know that's down. So I'd like to visit with the clerk about that. Their other thing was fire retention after the Buffalo Creek fire. And that brings me into the wildland fire training that was held at Roadway Volunteer Fire Department this last Tuesday night. All road hands attended. David Schwartz prepared a meal for us. And it was about a 2-hour long event. A lot of questions were asked. It was very informative from what the volunteer fire department saw from our side, what we saw from the fire department, and the Texas Forest Service was there to put it on. And so through conversations there, I think the road hands learned a bunch. I know I did. And again, a lot of questions were answered there. One thing that did come out of that meeting that I know I did not request, and I'm guessing none of the commissioners requested it in their budgets, not knowing theirs, but communication is the #1 problem that the Forest Service has with the precinct and along with the volunteer fire department has with us. So if we could do anything, they would like us to see if we could work on our communication, via radios or whatever. And we know that too, because we've been in several situations helping with those fires. Met with Central Texas Telecom Cooperative. They're going to do some more fiber optics out toward the Zephyr area that's on both Dale and my road, coming down 549 and 530 in that area. Gonna have to get. They're going to be in the bar ditch in some places, but it's just not applicable in a few places that they can stay in the landowners, so they're going to come out in the right away. After visiting with them. Other than that, had a little bit of last couple weekends, had a lot of litter and stuff at the swimming bridge from holiday weekend and stuff like that. But it's hard to tell who did it because they're out on the bridge. So cameras only on this side. So.
Are the cameras operational?
The ones on our side, the cameras are on that side, but if that new system gets approved and get put in, it'll be able to see them all the way. So we could see do that with a lot of debris down the river. Other than that, that's I have MCAD meeting this week, and then next month we'll have Good Country Community Action. That's it.
Thank you. I think I've talked about enough today, but just a few other things. One thing that Commissioner Williams warned me about out of the fire meeting before saying is all this rain we're having, we have exceptional growth in our pastures. The county's really looking pretty. The bad news is come August or September, whenever this stops and dries out, we're going to have a fuel source like we haven't had in years. So at some point there will be a big fire risk. a week or two ago, I think, the Goldsmith Associates completed a sort of a survey of the county's IT environment. I've got a little bit of verbal feedback, and I would say, at least from my perspective, it was helpful. We are still waiting for a written report and a proposal. And one of the considerations, two considerations, one was using outsourced IT ongoing, and need to know a cost to be able to see if we could afford it to budget. And so we don't have that at this point, and it's not in the current budget. The other thing is the phone system, and I'm expecting a report as to whether or not we can transition off of landline, copper, wire, and Frontier and go to a fiber-based voice over IP phone system, and both save money and increase reliability. I don't know about everybody else, but I'm continuing to not have outgoing long distance at least one afternoon a week. It's pretty frustrating, and if it weren't for cell phones, it would bring things to a stop. But those prices are not yet known. Now, we did meet with Central Texas Telephone Co-op, and they have the infrastructure to support that, and are actually have installed it in their stock. So it's here. We have a version of it, a modified version of it, running in a law enforcement center and MCAD. So this isn't black magic. It's here. It's real. Our community's fortunate to have the connectivity we have, and I'm planning to try and take advantage of it.
And also Shelley said they had it out at the license.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Other thing to mention on the clerk's office, I believe we have some jury activities starting up again in August. So notices and stuff will be going out in the courthouse. We'll be busy in August. And that's all I have. There being nothing further on the agenda, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.